Hello, thank you for watching this segment of YourTown television program and my particular part of it, which is artivism, where we look for kind of the intersections of where our communities inform our art and where our art informs a better community. Call it social justice through art, but certainly enjoying and celebrating the creative process. I'm King Grossman, your host, and I'm particularly glad to have for our first segment this month, Holly Eger, a local artist that spends time both here and in Martha's Vineyard. And Holly's written a wonderful novel called Split Rock, yes, and I've read it, and just a totally enjoyable read. And I particularly was looking forward to this interview because, you know, you spend time, you and your family spend time both in Martha's Vineyard and here in the Monterey Peninsula area. And both those areas have differences and similarities, but one of the similarities is they both have a creative soul. They've drawn artists and bohemian artists, and of course a lot of other folks that appreciate that environment. And something about the seaside and the shoreline, folks can see that you know, this is informing these areas and informing your work. So maybe talk about how the landscape and the kind of folk it bring informed Split Rock.
Well, the ocean.
Yeah.
And the ocean is, you know, there's nothing like it.
Right.
Constantly changing, seductive, dangerous, placid, wonderful, cold. It's everything.
Yes.
And then the light, I would say. So I never get tired of studying the light on the ocean and the play of light on the waves. So I wasted a lot of days just, you know, doing that. But I think there is something that creative people are drawn to, well, inaccessible places. So Martha's Vineyard is not easy to get to. Well, it's a lot easier now than it used to be. But, you know, when you're there, you can, and same here, you know, it's a little tricky to get down here. So, but I think it's mostly the natural beauty, just for the daydreamers in the group.
It draws the dreamers.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
And even those that want to dream just for a little while.
Yeah,
So,
and the cool air also.
yes.
You know, because there's no humidity, it's not dry.
Right. It's pleasant.
It's wonderful.
And invigorating.
Yes,
Yeah.
totally exhilarating and invigorating.
So Split Rock, which is this fabulous story. I mean, I'm a guy and I loved reading it. It features women in many ways, but also men. I mean, in these wonderful relationships you develop, and they're so well structured. Your characters are so well structured in the book because they each illustrate a type of relationship, it seems to me. And so maybe talk about how this story developed for you and how these characters came about, maybe something about them.
Yeah, about the characters?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I always say this, but, you know, James Taylor, who's from Martha's Vineyard, always says he never wrote the song. He was just the first person to hear it. And that's kind of how this was for me, is I felt like I didn't really have a choice about writing it, like it had to be told. And all I had to really do was get into a zone in a quiet place. And I tend to go to libraries. And then I was always surprised at what the characters would say. So their personalities were already formed.
Right.
It's very hard to describe, but when you get into that really cool creative zone, and your characters are just themselves. Now, that isn't entirely true because the children in the book are my children, frozen in time between 3 and 9. Okay. So they were never in the situations that they were in, except I mean, I just kind of imagine what they would do in those situations.
Right.
That, of course, is not entirely true. I used to keep a little folder of the cute things that they would say, and when I would get stuck, sometimes I would look at the fold, you know, what I had jotted down, and then I'd get a whole scene from that. But you know, everyone thinks I'm Annie, but I'm not really Annie. Annie's kind of like who I wish I were. You know, I don't swim as well as she is. I'm not as. I mean, she's an awesome heroine,
yes,
and a little bit larger than life maybe with her swimming. And then everyone thinks that Gordon, the husband, is my husband, but he's really not. And people who know us well realize that.
Yes.
And I've just given up on letting people think that it's all the same. Even the dog is a composite. I'd say everybody's a composite. The dog on the cover is actually my dog, but he's a combination of my old dog and then himself and then kind of a little bit of a superhuman dog.
Yes.
So I'd say everybody's a composite.
Yeah.
But I was always surprised at what they said.
That's what. So you like
even with an outline.
Yeah. So let's talk about your creative process then a little bit. Yeah. So I know authors that don't know what they're going to write when they sit down every time they sit down at their keyboard. I know others that have spent 2 years mapping everything out.
Yeah.
I mean, John Irving does that, and then he writes the books backwards, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how organized they are.
Wow.
And, of course, I do something. And every author seems to have their own. So yeah, what works for you, and how did you?
Well, my story is a little strange because, first of all, I'd say I'm somewhere in the middle, I think, and it depends on, I don't think I'm any one thing or another.
Right.
But I was always a writer. I always wrote fiction. My mother always said I was born with a pen in my hand and that was all I would do. I'd while away the afternoons, and my mother was very indulgent about that. And I kind of thought I'd have 20 books published by this stage of life. But anyway, and I always wrote in college, and I have a master's in English in fiction writing. And then I started the book when my children were really little, thinking that I would, when my youngest went to nursery school, I have 3 and 4 years, thought that I would have it done by the time she was in first grade. But then, life got in the way. We moved overseas 7 times with 3 kids and the dog, and I was the expat wife.
Yes.
And but anyway, when I had started it, I had signed up for this workshop, and I needed to come up with something. So I was literally writing on the backs of envelopes during nursery school, and then put that together into a story, not really knowing what I would do. And then we started moving, and then I put it aside. And actually, what really happened is I think as a mom, a stay-at-home mom, and my husband was often traveling, I got very scared of the creative energy in me, because when I was writing, actually the house could have burned down and I probably wouldn't have noticed.
Right.
And I actually it was unleashed, and I was scared.
Yeah.
So I didn't think I could be a responsible mom and write, and which I kind of regret now. But anyway, so I put it aside for about 15 years.
Yes.
And then when I came back to it, finally, after burying my mother and my father and moving all the time, and burying a few other people too, unfortunately, grief got to be a sort of a pervasive theme. Yes. Minor theme, but still a theme.
Yes, it is. It's a thread in this book.
It's a thread, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
But the way so I had it, when I came back to it and decided to really work on it, I did make an outline, but, my writing teacher at the time said, writing for a lot of people is like driving a car with a map. You have a pretty good idea of where you're going, but you can't really see always more than 20 feet ahead with your headlights.
Yes.
So just trust it. So that's what I did, and but I did kind of know where I was going, and then what I would do is, I love to sleep. I really do. And I have amazing dreams. And when I was in the zone, which I can't wait to get back into, it's like a runner's high,
Yes,
but it lasts, it's like really amazing.
Yes.
I would actually dream the next scene. And then when I would wake up in the morning, my husband was wonderful. He would bring me coffee, wouldn't say anything, because one word would wreck it. And I would just have that wisp, and I could just see the next scene.
Yes.
And so then all I had to do was go to the library and write it down. And then sometimes I would have a nap in the afternoon and then see the next scene. And it kind of and it's actually,
it was letting your subconscious kind of
it's not almost.
Yeah.
It's really, and
really.
you have to trust it, and that's not always right. But then, I could at least see the scene, and then my characters would just be in that scene, and then they would know what to say.
Yes, no, I hear you. That's fabulous.
It's really, really
Trusting
cool.
your subconscious.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, so Annie in this story, I mean, to me, and you and I have talked about this a little bit in before the show and other times. She is a person that is strong, and in that strength, almost puts up some barriers for herself that she needs to break through, and she finds this wonderful community in Martha's Vineyard, and in this woman that is older than she is.
Yeah. Lindsay. Yeah.
And as she kind of is, so talk about that, why that was important to your story.
As a New Englander, we're we're more reserved. Okay, then I mean everyone knows that, but that's not always a great thing because you have this feeling of self-reliance that you can do everything. And what happens to Annie is she just kind of thinks she's perfect. I mean, she's a little obnoxious at the beginning, I think. Yeah. But, you know, she changes, thank goodness.
Yeah, this is her arc.
Yeah, this is her arc, yeah. So when she almost drowns and leaves her children on the beach, and this is not a spoiler, but when she leaves, you know, she does a really stupid thing. And it's also very proud, thinking that she can just go swim, no problem.
She can handle it.
That she can handle it. She can do anything. She gets caught in the riptide. It's terrifying. She really does come close to drowning. I know you're going to ask me, did you almost drown? Almost, but not nearly to that extent. It was more like I imagined, what if?
Yes.
Anyway, so then she's humbled, and then she realizes that she does need some friends. And actually, there's this whole community waiting for her, from her aunt who had bequeathed her this house. But at first she's like too good for everybody. Yeah. And then after she almost drowns, she realizes she gets broken down, and then there's a crack. So she's able to let people in.
Yes, let's put the book cover up again. One of the things that I found just absolutely wonderful about the metaphor of this, and I've got a copy of the book here, but in the split rock, which is actually on Martha's Vineyard, you can actually see through it to the other side in some part of it where there's light coming through it. And I mean, to me, that's what Annie was doing. You know, she was trying to find that light, and did through this community of folk that were there. I mean, so that had kind of had life make them more real, and also the kind of people that would go to Martha's Vineyard to begin with, right?
Yeah, pretty open-hearted. Not judgmental.
Yes. And don't you think Annie, all along, kind of, even though she might not have been able to articulate it on page one, went there to find that?
Yeah, I think she had kind of suppressed the cooler side of her.
Yes.
Herself.
Yeah. Well, I've got a question. Could you read us just a little short passage from here? Would that be something that we hadn't talked about? That I'm just springing.
Oh, geez. Okay, I'll be at the end.
Yeah, read a short little piece.
Okay.
Just a couple of minutes, just to get a feel for your writing. It's wonderful.
Okay, so this is at the very end. A lot happens, as you can see, but there's when she's bringing her family back and her husband who's been away to look at the rock. And the metaphor of the rock is constantly interesting to me. Like I keep seeing I keep getting new ideas from it that
new facets of what this metaphor is about.
And it changes, by the way, depending on the time of day, the tide, the light. Okay, so this is Annie talking to her children. They're taking a little hike out at sunset. The big crack expanded as water got in there to the crack, froze in the winter, and melted again in the summer. Annie said, "It's almost as if it has a human heart." She and Meg, placing their stones, Meg is her little child, she and Meg, placing their stones, paused to admire the water, swirling as usual in gentle eddies around their ankles. "See how perfect it is, even though it's all cracked and splotchy? The imperfection is what makes it so magnificent," Annie said. "It's not a fixed, motionless painting. It's real, like us." Standing in the water, I'll just jump ahead here. Standing in the water, the family stood arm in arm in a little arc around Split Rock and their beautiful red cardinal. Lily, Robbie, Gordon, Annie holding Meg, and Tashmu, the dog, beside them. Together they gazed across Vineyard Sound to the Elizabeth Islands and watched the sun sink slowly into the ocean. The sky began putting away its palette of pinks and oranges, replacing them with subtle purples and hues and blues.
Lovely. No, that gets the rock and what it meant to them. Yeah. Thank you for doing that. I think it was Colum McCann that said that the language of a book is the most important thing about it. And whether I agree with that or not, I don't know, but I know the language is very important. And that's just, I'm so glad you read from your book because your language is lovely in it. And
Oh, thank you. I was trying to make it like an impressionist painting. So I was trying to, maybe because I've always been nearsighted, I don't know, but I see things in kind of an impressionist world.
Yeah.
And I was trying to use words to create a watery, sort of Monet, Renoir type of, maybe a little more Monet, I suppose, feeling.
Yes, a texture to the book.
Yeah,
to
and
the
and then
story.
because it took me so long to write it, I had a lot of time to think about my word choice. So that was nice too.
Yeah. It reminds me of a wonderful singer-songwriter that I know, and his first album, his name was Rusty Weir. He's gone now. He's a really wonderful singer. He did several albums, and he said, "What was your favorite?" He said, "It was my first one." He said, "I had 18 years to work on it." So yeah, we get to massage that first novel a whole lot. So, but it shows because the writing is so coherent and lyrical. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
thanks.
So, switching gears a little bit, can you talk about your current project or what you're planning?
Well, my current project, I mean, first of all, it's been a little hard to get into it because having this published at midlife, I mean, it came out when I was 55, when my youngest graduated from college, my son was about to get married, has been such a dream come true, and even just being on this show. And I end up giving a lot of talks largely to women, just to inspire them to finish their project.
Yes.
Because when I had started it, when my little girl was littlest was in nursery school, and then coming back to it so much later, and then of course it had changed. I've seemed to become this little emblem of like, stick to your projects. So people are writing to me all the time. I took up painting or music, or finally learning how to play the violin at 60, kind of thing.
Yes.
Which makes me feel great. So it's been taking it's been a little bit preoccupying, and then all of these the promotion stuff that's still going on with the book, which I didn't expect.
Yes, which is different than writing.
Yeah, and believe me, I love every single second. But so my new project is I have to write it because the character Aunt Faye in the book, who is sort of different from my Aunt Jenna, but was based on her.
Yes.
She had, when I was very little, told me, you have to write the story of, so it would be my great-grandfather's brother, and he was, it's a very long story, it's kind of like it's become like a Downton Abbey kind of a thing.
Yes.
But basically there are 87 boxes of his letters at Princeton University, and he was a gentleman, a Harvard scholar, and a bigamist.
Wow.
Didn't see that coming.
Wow.
And he actually was married 3 times, and he was really handsome. When I showed my daughter his picture, which I found in Princeton, she said, "Oh, no wonder he had 3 wives." But anyways, he the second wife, who was the first in the love triangle, the bigamist time, during the bigamist period of his life, ended up. I thought the book was going to be about my great-grandfather's brother, but actually he's kind of just a cad. And the fascinating one that I didn't expect at all, that I have learned from all the reading, is the second of 3 wives.
Wow.
My husband always says 2A.
So I'm going to stop you there because we are out of time.
Shoot.
But it's a good place to be out of time because I want you to come back and tell us about this story as it develops.
Okay.
All right.
All right,
Holly,
great.
thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much.
And thank you for being part of our first segment. Stay with us. We've got 2 more wonderful segments, both authors, one visual artist as well as author. So thank you very much for being with us on Artivism in YourTown television program.